Coronavirus Diary, Jerusalem, day 8. It's a beautiful and bright and sunny day, which is about probably the only really great thing about the day is how beautiful it is outside. We luckily have a porch in our house where we can sit outside. I've been told to be upbeat, but it doesn't strike me that it's a time to be upbeat. I'm reading Thomas Mann's Joseph and His Brothers, which is like an extension of the story, a kind of, in a rabbinic sense, it's a midrash, an extended midrash on the story of the Old Testament. And he stretches out the story of Joseph and Potiphar's wife. In the Bible, of course, she's just a seductress, and here she has a certain kind of psychic complexity. She decides at a certain point, because she senses her own attraction to Joseph, that she's going to find a way of getting rid of him. So she goes to her husband to ask him to throw Joseph out of the house because he's a Hebrew, a foreigner. And the Egyptians have this strong sense of national identity, and they don't want to be polluted by foreigners. It's a great book, obviously. And here is Mann talking about Potiphar's wife after we see her failing, or expect her to fail, as we know, at getting Joseph out of the house, or getting him out of her mind. To put it mildly, there is no proof for the naive, kind-hearted assumption that people's deepest concern is for peace and quiet, for making sure that the structure of their lives, built up and secured with such artifice and care, is never shaken, or worse, threatened with collapse. Experience, and in more than just isolated cases, teaches us that people are far more intent on bliss. You could read it as sensual bliss, but I want to read it as a kind of self-righteous spiritual bliss. Experience, and in more than just isolated cases, teaches us that people are far more intent on bliss and ruin, and have no thanks to spare for anyone who wishes to hold them back from it. In that case, please go right ahead. So unfortunately, I pray in a synagogue with the equivalent of Potiphar's wife, and for them to go right ahead is not only to endanger themselves, but to endanger other people. It's taken way too long in the religious community, and it's finally happened for people's self-righteous rage and bliss to yield to reality. I think this is really, Mann is writing about what Freud calls the death drive, that people have this natural tendency towards destruction. And here, in this case here, there's this, it's in the name of being right. It's in the name of being right in the framework of a world that's gone completely wrong. And of course, it's exactly the opposite. I don't think what we're suffering from now, though, is not this self-righteous rage anymore. It's this sense that among all people, certainly religious Jews, I've seen the pictures in Borough Park, I've seen the pictures here in Jerusalem, but also I've seen pictures in Tel Aviv on the boardwalk, and believe it or not, pictures of Italians on beaches, and stories I'm sure you saw of American college students on beaches on spring break. And all of that, I think, is part of this desire to be in complete denial about the nature of reality. It's not that we don't know what's happening. We all know. And it's the extent to which we allow that into our consciousness so we can be responsible. I was reading Freud on denial in an essay called Negation from 1925. And Freud writes that the beginning of the end of repression is denial, which is strange. But for Freud, the denial summons its opposite, meaning it summons the thing that it's denying, that even though it's a denial of something. And bringing that something into our consciousness, unfortunately, that's the beginning of responsibility. And we've seen time and again in this crisis, this has not happened. Surely, the Prime Minister of Israel, the President of the United States, the Prime Minister of Germany, all knew about the virus, its etiology, where its origin, and its predicted evolution, its predicted progress. We knew we were going to be here. I didn't know we were going to be here, but I knew we were going to be here, like several of my colleagues, thinking about the future, seeing the evolution of the virus in China, seeing the hysteria in Europe a month ago. We knew we were going to be in this place, and yet, we had to have Purim celebrations. So it's hard to say, is that because of just a kind of neuroses or a kind of psychic state that we can't control, that we can't get out of our comfort zone? Or do we maybe have to train ourselves a little bit more to live with fear and face it? So many times I've been told by people, you're overreacting, you're making me too nervous, you're too nervous, you're going to stress yourself out. And I'm like, I'm not going to stress myself out if you just listen to me. In a way, some of the people I know were willing to face the fear. Those other people who are not willing to face the fear, they don't want to hear what you have to say, because to them that's that moment of denial. So the question for us is, going forth, what's the decision we have to make now to think about what we can't imagine in a week or two, or we can beginning to imagine might happen in a week or two? What can we do to prevent that? You know, I read Jeremiah every year with the rest of many Jewish people on the 9th of Av, and it's finally occurred to me why people didn't listen to him. Because people prefer their comfort zones. They prefer not to take responsibility. They prefer just to stay in the same place, and then the crisis happens. And here we are. Corona Diary, Day 8, Jerusalem.